Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unit 3, Day 1. And this is going to be the day where we are going to see, or the defining event that is really going to lead to the breaking of the relationship between Great Britain and the colonies. You're going to see, even building up to the American Revolution, there are a lot of people in the colonies that hope for reconciliation between the two. But because of the direct result of the 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War, it's going to make it to the point that the relationship between the colonies and the British can't be fixed. So this war, even though we know it as the French and Indian War, in Europe it was called the 7 Years' War because it did involve a lot more than just the fighting in the colonies. It also involved fighting over in Europe as well, between the British and the French. And with the 7 Years' War, first of all, you're going to see it's going to be the first time that a lot of the colonists have direct interaction with people from Britain, with the British, and a lot of that being British soldiers. And it's going to be interesting when they meet, because the colonists are going to realize, I don't really like British soldiers very much. And the British soldiers are going to think very lowly of the colonists that they meet. So that is going to draw some bitterness between the two sides. You're also going to see the emergence of George Washington. To this point, had been living in Virginia. He was a wealthy man. But this is going to be the war where he is going to get his military experience, which even the military experience during he gets this isn't a great deal, but that will have influence on the American Revolution. So after this 7 Years' War, you're going to see the British really clamp down in their policy and what they do in their control of the colonies. We'll talk more about this tomorrow, but you're going to see the Proclamation of 1763 that comes out right at the end of the 7 Years' War, and how that's going to kind of set the colonists on fire as far as being angry over how the British are treating them. Also, out of the 7 Years' War, you're going to have Indian groups very upset who had sided with the French in the French and Indian War and were upset that the French did not win, and their response to that. Most famously, you are going to have Pontiac's Rebellion that occurs, which Pontiac's Rebellion was actually very successful at the start. Many cities in Michigan, Ohio, and those areas were taken over, or forts were taken over by the Indians. I do have a slide in there about Fort Michilimackinac. You're going to see that name in there. I've actually been to where that fort is. And the story to come out of that fort during Pontiac's Rebellion is basically how the Indians lured the colonists that were in there and the soldiers that were in there. They lured them out to basically play like what we would call a game of soccer. And when they lured them out, then they killed them so that they could take over the fort there. So you're going to see coming out of that 7 Years' War, again, the natives upset, the colonists upset, and the British left wondering, how do we pay and how do we control and defend these colonies that we have over there? Because remember, wars are very, very expensive. And the British were left with a lot of debt, and they were wondering, how do we make up for, how do we pay this debt off? And really, they get a lot of pressure from the wealthy in England, who paid most of the taxes, to start taxing the colonies more, because the colonies paid very, very little taxes in comparison to what the British people did during that time. So as I said, go through, make sure that you are reading through the slides here, looking at those causes of the French and Indian War and what were the results of that. Because really the next 2 days, we're going to be talking about British colonial policy and how the French and Indian War really led to discontent, which would then lead to the American Revolution. You are also going to read a very interesting article today titled The First World War, that talks about how in many ways you could call the 7 Years' War the first truly world war, because you do have most of the major powers in the world at that time as part of it. So, as always, if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, have a great day and enjoy learning about the 7 Years' War.